God's blessings for all of you here this morning. The Committee on Municipal Affairs, Tourism, Housing, and Historic Preservation is holding this roundtable meeting this morning. It is 9:00 a.m. and I'd like to thank everybody for coming here this morning. And before I introduce everybody here, I'd like to just share with the people of Guam several areas that we will be tapping into in reference to this follow-up on the action plan for the cruise industry here for our island. We will be tapping into the economic benefits of homeporting a cruise line in the region, the most feasible location for such homeporting, the economic viability and benefits of inter-island itineraries and attractions, and the existing and potential demand by source markets and marketing presentation strategy for each critical stakeholder and policy making audience, which will be identified. I'd like to thank the good speaker, who's also a committee chairperson in Tourism Committee, Speaker Wampat. Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen of the listening audience, here with us this morning, and I'm very humbled at the fact that they're here, President of the Micronesian Cruise Association here on Guam is President Jerry Perez. Thank you so much. And I do know there's committee members. I'll start with Chairman Mark Baldega for the Guam Visitors Bureau, and the GIDA's representation, and the chairperson for the cruise industry under GIDA's hat is Mr. Monty Mesa, also committee member of the Micronesian Cruise Association for Guam, Mr. Monty McDowell. PATA chairperson for Micronesia and very instrumental in helping us move this cruise industry forward, Madam President for PATA Micronesia, Ms. Pilar Laguatna, wearing several different hats as it relates to tourism. Thank you very much for joining us. And the Deputy General Manager representing the GVB. Thank you, Senator Tello Taitigui, for joining us this morning. Truly appreciate it. To our listening audience, we have a full agenda as it relates to where we at, where we need to be, where we're going to, and I will go ahead and yield the floor to the President, Mr. Jerry Perez. And if I may, just for record purposes, because everything is being recorded, just state your name for the record, and then we can proceed with the conversation, okay? Okay.
Monty McDowell, member, Micronesian Cruise Association.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm Monty Mesa, here for the Guam Economic Development and the Cruise Development Strategy, and also as a ad hoc member for the Micronesian Cruise Association.
Good morning, Speaker and Senator Tello Taitigui, Guam Visitors Bureau, Deputy General Manager.
Good morning, Hafaday. I'm Mark Baldega, Chairman of the Guam Visitors Bureau, and I'd like to extend regrets for we have a newly appointed person just in charge of cruise for the GVB board, which is Director Shelley Calvo. So she's off island, but I'm sure she'll be picking up this ball and running with it. Thank you.
Hafaday, my name is Pilar Laguatna. I'm Chairwoman for the PATA Micronesia Chapter and Marketing Manager for Guam Visitors Bureau.
Thank you very much. Mr. Perez?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chairperson and members of your committee and Speaker Wampat. For the record, my name is Jerry Perez, and I'm here in my capacity as President of the Micronesian Cruise Association, a nonprofit, non-stock 501c3 membership corporation comprised of individuals, businesses, and representatives from each of the island states of Micronesia. On behalf of my MCA board and membership, I will take this opportunity first to acknowledge, with a great deal of thanks and appreciation, the financial and logistical support that the legislature and Guam Visitors Bureau have been providing and continue to provide our association. As you know, we have no full-time staff, and all that we do is pretty much voluntary, and so that's why we owe a great deal of appreciation to GVB for all the administrative and logistical support provided. Thank you, Mark and Pilar. We are especially heartened by the personal interest that you, Senator Barnes, Speaker Wampat, and Vice Speaker Cruz continue to share in nurturing our fledgling association, and in particular, being a part of our growth and development. You know, much has happened since we last met at a public hearing about 2 years ago, when we discussed Guam's role as the regional hub in developing Micronesia's cruise industry. This had to do with a particular resolution, I recall, at that time. So in the next few minutes, I will share some of the developments and the progress that we have made in, first of all, articulating the merits of the cruise industry for the region, and in particular, a compelling reason why a home port ship on Guam makes sense. I will also share recent reports that I have made to my own MCA board, so that you might be apprised of our activities and some of the recent developments and be updated on Guam's home porting initiative. At this time, I'd just like to go back 2 or 3 years and recap our initial presentation to policymakers in the region. Micronesia is an emerging regional cruise industry, and this is the brief, pretty much, that was presented not only before the APIL, and at the time, you will recall, Speaker Wampat was chairperson of the APIL at the time, and also the same basic information shared with Micronesian Chief Executives Association, and more recently, MILA, which is the Mariana Islands legislative folks. And so I'm going to go through this very, very quickly because time, but I will make copies available both electronically and in some printed form for your record. So in brief, there are increasing interest in, of course, the global tourism industry, and in particular market segments of the cruise industry. And the Asia-Pacific future and regional outlook looks promising. The Micronesian opportunity has both regional and local appeal. It benefits the island destinations, and there's a business class for new island destinations to be made before the industry. Some of the strategic development issues have to do with regional and local challenges associated with various institutional development and undeveloped infrastructure, authenticity of island destinations, and other support. So the cruise industry is one of the world's fastest growing tourism segments, growing an average of 7 to 8% in the last 15 to 20 years plus. But the bulk right now of the market originates in North America, and capacity utilization is consistently over 100%. That is why you have in the pipeline a lot of shipbuilding construction still underway. This has been the cruise industry has historically been dominated by North American and European markets, but there's growing cruise market opportunities worldwide. Lines are looking to diversify and differentiate. They're looking to broaden their itineraries and intensify their market segmentation globally. They're also looking for exotic, inexpensive, and unexplored, intriguing destinations in the world. And more particularly, proximity to other islands within Micronesia really provides us with diverse opportunities on itineraries. There's also the opportunity for a fly cruise products, and of course, potential for future home porting. And keep in mind, this information was shared with the policymakers about 2 years ago, so keep that in mind. The other benefit for cruise industry is that there's a lot of destination sampling taking place where future return visits continue to grow. By all industry accounts, the Asia Pacific region is the next growth engine for the cruise industry. And in more recent years, you will see a huge development in new ships, new inventory added to the Asia-Pacific theater, as well as new port construction up and down the Asian region. So Asia will be the growth engine in the future and it can really stimulate regional destination development, ports and itineraries. It can generate regional volume, critical mass, and economies of scale in lesser developed destinations. And it can encourage ancillary investments and institutional support businesses, therefore benefiting the area. There is strong support for the benefits of tourism because, first of all, it's a strong export revenue source, especially for Micronesia. There's less infrastructure required. There's lower environmental and social impact compared to a very, very mass market orientation. And there's minimal transit port handling requirements. Micronesia really is a region that offers diverse history, culture, and attractions. We have good airlift accessibility, and we have generally good port facilities in the major ports in Micronesia. What we need to do more is develop more shore excursion and business opportunities. So if you look at Micronesia, we really prefer to call it the Sea of Islands. Instead of islands in the sea, we call it Sea of Islands. And this is just an overview on where we are. And regionally, we really have a population of about 400,000 residents and about 1.5, 1.6 million tourists annually, regionally. So if you look at Micronesia, Micronesia is pretty rich in history and colonialization. And I won't go through all this and read it because I'll just have it available to you, but it gives you a flavor of the rich history and culture of the island. The political jurisdictions, of course, we have the Republic of Palau, which is an independent sovereign republic. It's kind of slow, sorry. Sorry, it's loading. Am I hitting it too fast? Yeah. Then, of course, Guam, I won't go too a lot, but I just want to give you a sampling of how come it's not popping up? Oh, there, it's coming up now. I guess I'll slow down.
You got fast fingers.
Stuck. It keeps getting stuck here.
Stuck on DFS from the old days, Jerry. You didn't want to go. Just wanted to.
Now let's see how long it stays there.
That's right.
Monty is not to be slighted. Normally this isn't this slow, actually. I'm not sure. Well, I can skip this whole thing, but I wanted to give you some impressions on the region. Yeah.
The impressions. Yeah.
Yeah, Saipan, of course. Just give you some brief images on the diversity of our area. Bird Island, World War history. Regan. Then, of course, the Federated States of Micronesia. Pohnpei is another state. Of course, the famous rock. Kushai. I will update you a little later on. We had our last board meeting last month in Kushai. The Sleeping Lady, you can see the form. This is the Koshrai Village Eco Resort. And then, of course, the Marshalls. As you can see, each of these island groups have diverse islands unto themselves. This is a great picture. I love this picture. This is so typical Micronesian, you know? Free. And then also, it's outside our jurisdiction, but it's part of our geographic area, is Kiribati. Kiribati is bigger than the region of Micronesia, if you can believe it. So, I mean, a lot of cruising going through there, as you can see. They have a north-south route from Hawaii all the way down to Samoa, Fiji. Bone fishing has become very popular down there, actually. So these are the basic political jurisdictions that offer a very, very diverse itinerary to the market. Man. Some of the challenges regionally and locally basically have to do with a decent regulatory framework and some uniformity between and among island states. Some of it will involve streamlining vessel clearances and passenger processing, particularly in ports. And we currently have just limited cruise calls, and there's little knowledge and exposure of our destination. There's also some challenges as it relates to, of course, the economic cycles around the world, as well as climate situations. And just to give you an idea on some of the economic benefits, we just did a sampling, and cruisers average about $1,700 spending versus non-cruisers. Of course, this is a demographic showing 50 years, household income's pretty affluent. And frequently, cruisers frequently do 2-3 trips a year and represent about 21% of the total cruise market. When we pulled this together a couple of years ago, we just did an inventory on how many ships visited the island between this period. And there were 39 ports of call through June of that year with 27,000 passengers. And this is the nationality mix contained in the vessels. We used to get an average of 7 to 8 vessels per year, but in more recent years, it's kind of fallen down. I'm not sure really what's going on down at the port, but a lot of that might have to do with the construction situation, because a lot of these calls that come to Guam right now are done way, way in advance. It just don't happen on the spur of the moment. And in this year, we had the Queen Mary, which really kind of pumped up the numbers, if you recall. Monty, I think you were still there at the GVB when you recall that. We just did a quick calculation on just the total passengers. Roughly 70% would come ashore. Not all of them would come ashore. And using industry multipliers, we came up with numbers that show actually $51 million into the Guam economy, about 778,000 in GRT, payroll taxes, excluding the crew. Here is the business case actually for Guam and Micronesia. Not so much for Guam, because we do get incremental benefit, even though it's a small amount. But if you look at the bottom here, the tourism dollar share per capita in Palau is 3,000 some. In Guam, it's like 5,000 something. But if you look at the FSM and the Marshalls, it's $146 and $116. Now, this figure is somewhat dated because I know our arrivals in Guam have increased, but it had not altered significantly the proportionality. So one of the reasons why the smaller islands actually would like to see more cruise vessels, because it's a way to tactically infuse spending in their islands without the burden of infrastructure issues. The Kiribati story, I shared this at the APIL meeting, is they're geographically positioned between Hawaii and Tahiti, and they've actually Norwegian Cruise Line did a deal with the local political leadership, and they developed their improvements for the exclusive use of their vessels coming in from Honolulu. And so basically they've, in just a few short years, their economy improved significantly, and their inbound international airline seats increased, and their GDP improved, and more importantly, they have like, I think that year they did like about 300,000 or 400,000 passengers. Phoenix Islands is very remote, much more remote than we are out here. So this is just a little bit on Kiribati. It's really an ideal out-of-country port call because of the Jones Act in Hawaii. So NCL basically takes an overnight or two-night cruise down to Kiribati and back. That way, they don't have to go from island to island in Hawaii. So they had invested $5 million in infrastructure and social and educational programs for fewer than 2,000 residents, and they enjoyed more than 200 port calls in 6 years, and over 350,000. That's the number I was looking for. 350,000 visitors. So I'd like to just recap this again to show that in terms of the economic distribution on a per capita index, you can see why the islands of Micronesia outside are very interested in attracting more cruise vessels into their area. So this is typically the assumption: one day at 60% of typical passenger spending. Guam and Sinamai multiplier, so we get the benefit of the supply chain businesses. I won't go through detail on what we developed a gross positive index number, but what I wanted to show based on that is that for Palau and Guam, well, Palau most especially, it means a lot for them. And Guam, if you look at the index of plus one, it's really very marginal for us, as well as the CNMI, because of the huge numbers of air packs that we get here. But for cruise businesses, for particularly for 250 passenger vessels and under, you can see the index just shoot up in the FSM to 40 just for smaller vessels. And we really don't get a good index on Guam until we hit like 3,000 plus passengers. So you can see that we have almost like a bifurcated market where Guam and the CNMI, the benefit of cruise visits here is not as significant as they are in the smaller islands, where of course the arrival base is much lower. especially if you look at RMI, even at a 250 passenger vessel, they've cut plus 10. So Micronesia is still a developing and emerging destination. Port calls historically have been basically 3 or 4. The first kind of port call that we get is the around-the-world cruises. And for these cruises, typically only 10 or 15% really stay on board for a around-the-world cruise. What happens on these visits is the first third, probably 20% or 25%, the second third, another 25-35%, and the last third, the rest of the passengers. And so we get that on island. The second kind of port calls we get are vessels that are being redeployed to Asia. And so instead of sending these vessels empty, they sell these cruises. The third ones we get is the seasonal one we get like from Japan. End of the year we get like the typical Akata tour ships and so forth. And the fourth one, of course, is the expeditionary kinds of vessels, the smaller vessels that are maybe 100 to 200 packs, and they're more niche driven. Okay, Guam just showing more port calls. Regionally, we get anywhere from 10 to 12 in 2012. I think this year we'll have a bigger number because I was just back from a board meeting in Koshrai, and they're getting 2 vessels this year compared to the usual one every couple of years or so. And typically a lot of these vessels come through Guam as well. The formation of the MCA started with 21 charter members, and it's comprised, of course, of private and government membership, and the mission is to grow and facilitate and promote Micronesia as a cruise destination. Just to be clear, the association really has a regional kind of role in promoting, encouraging the growth of the cruise industry, but at the end of the day, each island destination really has its own obligation of how much they want to get into it or not get into it, and that becomes an island by island initiative. All we can do is create the framework and the contacts and promoting the region, starting to communicate with the industry. And I've got some material here that I would pass as examples to show you. Some of the development issues that we really need to work on is authenticity of destination, highlighting our unique cultural, archaeological, and natural attractions, promoting cultural experiences and indigenous contacts, and welcoming and departing portside hospitality services. I can't tell you how important this part is in terms of welcoming and departing portside hospitality services, because word of mouth is very, very is very important in a small community of the cruise companies. I mean, you take like Carnival Cruises, for example, they probably control 45 to 50% of the market. Royal Caribbean, another 25 to 30%. Norwegian Cruise Lines, maybe 15%, and then all the others. But all the others are important because they do talk among themselves about how well they were treated at different ports, and more encouragement for them to return. So I can't underestimate that, can't understate that strongly enough. The other benefit of really welcoming and the hospitality service is faster facilitation on formalities, because the less time you provide them on shore, the less spend opportunity also for businesses. And this has been proven in some studies, like in the Virgin Islands, for example. Destination development issues we need to work on include properly licensed and certified vendors and tour guides. We need to ensure value for money. We need to have international service standards. This is not so much true in Guam, but particularly some of the other islands that are not really quite up to the service level that Guam and the CNMI and Palau might already have achieved. But shore excursions need variety in terms of segmentation by age groups and physical abilities. But more importantly, it's important for us to promote destination experiences and to enhance their port visits. We need to maximize local licensed vendor arrangements. We need a lot of, even on Guam, though, we need a lot of work yet in the area of taking care of surge arrivals because of transportation issues and other technicalities. Other regional destination development issues include, of course, the need for safety and security while they're ashore, both physical safety, crime prevention, food safety, sanitation, the importance of having ground and online staff to handle problems. Rental vehicles, taxis, buses, and other rental equipment is still an issue on Guam, particularly when large ships visit us. Some of the port issues involve, and I'm sorry that nobody from the port is here, but some regulatory policies and reasonable tariffs and reasonable environmental requirements throughout the islands, including shore logistics and terminal facilities. Having said that, there are investment opportunities to actually enhance shore experiences, and this is something that local businesses might want to look at in more scrutiny. Pier security, utility services, corporate centers, administrative support, itineraries, restaurant, coffee shops, retail shops, public telephones, phone cards, shuttle service. The wharf facilities include, of course, coach areas, elevated gangways, taxi service, on and on and on and on. I won't go through all those details with you, but just wanted to share that. One of the benefits we have here in Guam more than anybody else in the region, of course, is our airlift and our connectivity to the rest of the world. That's pretty important. So by way of conclusion, Micronesia really is an exciting and new destination in close proximity to future Asian area destinations. And we have a unique grouping of relatively undiscovered islands, offering diverse attractions, cultures, and history dating back to the time Monty McDowell was born. Yeah, you haven't gone to sleep yet. I just checked. And of course, a warm tropical climate. We essentially have a fairly decent regional development framework because of convenient air service access, telecommunications, and port facilities on Guam. We have a common language throughout the area in terms of English and a dollar currency. Destination experiences from the most primitive to the most modern of amenities, and a very rich and diverse culture, history, and natural attractions yet to be explored. And the islands are in various stages of socioeconomic development, and that's part of the reason we're this way. Some of the business opportunities include expanded itineraries, niche markets, and shore excursions, capacity building investments in regional infrastructure improvements and institutional support services, as well as regional cruise tourism segment penetration opportunities. Right now it's under 0.5, and in the U.S. alone, I know it's as high as 3% of their total tourists. Government development policy is starting to get very, very favorable, but we need to incentivize private investments to create a favorable business climate. We also need more work on HR training, particularly in the service culture area, and we need a more regulatory-friendly framework in general. So with that, I wanted to actually do a couple things before proceeding. Let's see. Whoops. There you go again. Okay. Alan, you got the file here? I'm trying to find. The board report. Oh, there. What I want to do, first of all, I'll pass these documents out. This was a board report from a year and a half ago that was held in Saipan, and I'll have you just pass this around. And then also in the packet is a strategic development framework. I'm doing this before I get to the board report because it sets it up. Okay. At our annual meeting in Koshrai just last month, that was what Monty McDowell was referring to as far as these ladies from Guam who having mangrove crab breakfast, lunch, and I was sharing that after they left Koshrai, they declared the mangrove crab an endangered species. but we had fun, and we actually had a good opportunity to meet with the regional leadership and board members that make up the MCA. So I just wanted to continue to remind this group that the MCA really is not just about Guam, but we need to be mindful of the other islands' participation. And Madam Speaker, you know how interested they are in really continuing to pursue this. Okay. So after the meeting in Saipan a year and a half ago or so, we didn't have a meeting until just this last month. And my report to the board basically recapped the fact that the cruise industry initiative has been approved by the regional leadership as a matter of policy, both at the Micronesian Chief Executive Summits, the various meetings of APIL, and more recently the Mariana Islands Legislative Association. And the MCA board and GVB pretty much is taking the regional market development lead, partly because of administrative and logistical convenience, but partly because, let's face it, we have more depth in the number of people who can really push this forward. Guam is a stakeholder, of course, as a nucleus is larger, and we have some financial support of the legislature and administrative support of the Guam Visitors Bureau. Let's see. So our market presence to date, because of the fact that we are a nonprofit association with no full-time staff other than volunteers, and we have very limited budgets that basically drive our activities. Our market presence to date has been very limited in scope, scale, and investment. The cruise industry news is one of the ways that we start to plant the seed about Micronesia, and I'll just pass this as an example. This is one of the most widely read, if not the most widely read magazines in the cruise industry. And Monty, I know you subscribe to this, but what I wanted to do, what I did was just copy the front page and also give you a sampling of the material that we had submitted for advertorial about Guam and Micronesia. So I'll pass this around just so you know. These are some of the things. So we also, to the extent that we can afford it, try to attend selected cruise conferences in Asia and Florida. And in a couple of these presentations, I was a panelist actually in Singapore one year, talking about Guam and Micronesia as a new destination. And then also Ernie Galito was a panelist at another meeting in Singapore. So we're very, very much engaged in starting to make contacts and networking with the industry at different levels. So the conference attendance has been very beneficial to us. First of all, it's a real learning experience for our Micronesian community because the cruise industry is more complicated than just having a ship come and go. And so it's important for us to learn more about this business. And it's also important for us to develop contacts with industry expertise, leaders, and peer destinations to find out what they're doing, what their emerging destinations are like, both from a mature destination point of view as well as an emerging destination. And more importantly, it provides networking opportunities with shipbuilders, owners of these vessels, and more importantly, operators and marketers of these opportunities. And I know that Monty has attended that, and I think Senator Barnes has attended as well, and I think as well as Tello and Pilar. So I think you would probably echo the same thing, that it's a great opportunity to meet these constituencies and also meeting and understanding destination marketeers, their tour planners, and their sales promotion. The basic problem we have here in Micronesia is that we are a very fragmented cruise destination. There's lots of potential and diversity, but we are relatively undeveloped or underdeveloped in terms of infrastructure and our institutional support base. We have disparate absorptive capacities depending on which island is involved, and we have very limited development capital, public funding, and market exposure. So, like I said earlier, we've been getting nothing more than really ad hoc port visits, or what I refer to as call ships, who call in our port rather than home porting here. So they're either here in terms of we just happen to be in the way for a round-the-world cruise, or they're redeploying assets to other destinations, and we have no critical mass to support a sustained industry development. We have scattered and unbundled attractions. Our shore income opportunity is very limited or non-existent, therefore making us not an attractive destination for operators. Tour logistics and interpretive capacity is limited or non-existent. So the fundamental strategy that the MCA is encouraging in the region is to create supply concentration and clustering of port visits. In order to do that, our recommendation, of course, is to see if we can home port a vessel in Guam, as some of you have already recognized that to be a desirable initiative. First of all, we have the available labor, infrastructure, and institutional support. We have lodging and airlift capacity, and we have supply chain conveniences and logistics, such as repairs and maintenance and chandeliering service and so forth. So the initial strategy that the MCA board, which includes board members from Palau, the FSM, and Marshals, who agreed that we should try to have one started, and Guam was the right place to do it, to try to create probably a 3, 5, or 7-day itinerary with an occasional 7 to 10-day itinerary that would shoot out to their islands, and to try to intensify the regional buzz, political support, and marketing initiatives. The real benefit from cruise line industry is home porting. Call ports are limited and competitive. Home porting provides local employment, local tax revenues, and the benefits and economic opportunities from the whole supply chain and maintenance and repair situation. It's really not likely for any of the big four companies, whether it's Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian Line, or Star, and even MSC, to home port an asset in Micronesia. Because what's happening in the last few years and currently underway is that we're going through an era of backfilling and consolidation in existing primary markets that are already under pressure. And so their priority is to backfill the existing structure of their markets. There's also been fairly marginal returns in the cruise industry in recent years, owing to higher fuel expenses and other issues. And they're figuring new ways of packaging and promoting traditional and existing destinations associated with the era of backfilling and consolidation. And they're attempting to revitalize products that they already have in each destination. The focus on home porting asset would be on Guam would be like mini cruises in Micronesia of say 3 to 4 days. 12-hour overnights are probably ideal according to people that we talk to. And the cruise span and linking ports of call within a 1 week period, a 1 week turnaround. Ship acquisition tends to be expensive. Larger ships are really the name of the game these days, and there's a lot of volatility in pricing and availability. Charters are difficult and expensive. The purchase of a company and joint ventures are very risky. So a concession approach can be turned into a major opportunity at minimal cost or no cost to the islands. And this is kind of like our preferred option if we look at the landscape and talking to people in the industry. A conceptual strategy to home port a cruise line, basically, and what we're trying to do as MCA in the region is to facilitate this process by forming perhaps a special purpose entity. I've got a handout here that I'm going to send out. Did I send that out already? Oh, here you go. I'll talk to that in a second. And probably injecting seed capital. Now, Guam cannot qualify for funding from ADB or the World Bank because we're a donor country, but some of these islands actually can perhaps apply for some of these development funds, and Guam getting the benefit of their piggybacking on that benefit. Concession agreements with each government would be the way to do this thing, and where we would have an exclusive cruise line for the area. And there's also an option to opt out. But we need, for this to really materialize, we need anywhere from 10, possibly, my preference, frankly, is 15 to 20 years lease. I think under current law, and I think I've discussed this with the senator already, it's limited to 5 years. And so it's impossible to get a committed operator to invest millions of dollars to, put an asset here and expect only 5 years lease in a port. So perhaps some legislation might be needed if required. And in the case of GITA, perhaps some enhancement can be provided. But I will go to that in a minute here. But let me just... So the action plan today with MCA is basically continue to market the area, see if we can work with one of the islands in the region, Guam, to home port a vessel here. And an action plan basically was approved by the MCA board last year. And with the financial support we've been getting from the legislature, we were able to be frugal enough to save $30,000 to retain a consultant to help us package a framework and a business model that we can come out. What we decided to do at the meeting in Kosrae is that we had saved additional funding from what we've been getting and have up to $60,000 from available funds that we can now devote to retain a consultant that can help us draft basically a report as to the merits of home porting, what are the issues, developing a public policy case, developing a business model recommendation, and so on. And the board basically approved that expenditure, but what has happened in the meantime following that meeting is, I'll just wrap this up. What has happened since that meeting is I was able to collaborate with the chairperson of the PATA Micronesia chapter and GVB, and instead of trying to hire a consultant, see if we can get a PATA task force, because we are all members of PATA, and part of the benefit of PATA membership is the engagement of a task force. And so and we've opted then to allocate this funding to support the PATA task force. And what I like to do at this time is ask Pilar if you could update us on that request that I know that GVB has submitted. And Mark, I know that you were involved in pushing that through, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paris. First of all, I would like to really extend my appreciation to our Honorable Speaker, Vice Speaker, and our Oversight Chair for inviting myself as PATA Micronesia Chapter Chair to be here to support the work of GVB and MCA. In my capacity, I'd like to also acknowledge my co-chair for our Education Committee for the PATA Micronesia Chapter, because human capital development will be a very necessary thing for us to continue to develop, not just for the cruise, but for our growing industry in Guam and in the region. Continuing with the presentation that Jerry Paris made on the cruise initiative, we did approach the PATA headquarters back in September to officially ask for a PATA task force. This is a very unique benefit of being a member of PATA. And as a government entity, such as the Guam Visitors Bureau, we have this opportunity to request for a task force regarding any discipline in tourism. And so in this case, we thought that we could take advantage of our cruise initiative and see what we can learn from world experts. So an official letter was delivered to PATA through our general manager, Nathan DeKnight, and it was immediately accepted by PATA's CEO, Mario Hardy. And then from then on, once we received the approval of a task force, Mario himself, the CEO, personally scouted around for world experts to tackle our initiative. Now, what's so unique about the task force is that as a member, we do not pay for any professional fees. So this is the beauty of going this route and still learning about the things that we need to do, or at least getting a perspective of world experts related to tourism and the cruise initiative. So they were 5 selected experts that were sought by PATA to engage in the cruise initiative for our efforts with MCA and GVB and our chapter. And I'd like to share those task force individuals with you. The first expert is Greg Glassen. Mr. Glassen is a travel and tourism industry strategist with 20 plus years of leadership experience with blue chip organizations, including Canada's National Destination Marketing Agency, the Canadian Tourism Commission. Greg is an expert in the development and execution of marketing strategies, leveraging new technologies. Our second expert is a gentleman by the name of Oliver Martin. Oliver is a stakeholder and an engagement specialist with 15 plus years of international experience working with leadership organizations. And his expert is in design and execution of research to identify innovation in marketing and reputation strategy. He also works close with senior leadership teams to measure competitive performance and brand renaissance and navigate the sustainability agenda. Oliver has also served as the Associate Director of the Pacific Asia Travel Association Strategic Intelligence Center. In addition, he co-manages the center. Oliver has also been a frequent panelist of CNBC Asia's Monitoring Business Program. Our third expert is identified as Kevin Long. Kevin is the cruise line investment expert. He saw through the distinguished career of spanning over 36 years in the Singapore Tourism Board. The key position he held there was Vice President for the Eastern Region, Director of Exhibitions and Conventions, and Director in Events Marketing. For his posting as Regional Director for the Oceania region, his responsibility was marketing Singapore and Australia and New Zealand. In that role, he coordinated the promotion of cruising for the Oceania's countries. During that time, Kevin, while he was with the Singapore Tourism Board, also was appointed with a double hat as Senior Director for Special Duties to represent Singapore in the Asian Cruise Working Group, which steered the development of the Asiana cruise industry. During his tenure, he worked with cruise lines to initiate the formation of the Asia Cruise Association, to coordinate engagement with cruise industry entities, and to drive the private sector to develop the cruise industry. Our fourth expert is Julian Dickens. Julian is niche in the travel trade representation and media relations professional, and she has more than 10 years of experience working with special tourism brands and emerging destinations. So she will be our cruise line trade development expert. Julian also heads up the Global Tour Operator Sales and Media Relation Department for multi-country cruise line specialists in Aboriginal culture and Arctic explorations. She also opened a company with trade links to new markets such as South Korea, China, Japan, Australia, all resulting to a 20% increase in arrivals year after year. Our fifth and final expert is named Paul Valli. Paul's career spans over 25 years in destination sales, marketing, and service management. He has provided consulting services and advice in Thailand, Puerto Rico, Aruba, Panama, and Canada, and his consulting experiences include work with Intervista, which is a global firm specializing in aviation and tourism consulting as a partner to Gain Edge in Americas. He's also formerly the executive vice president of Tourism Vancouver, and he has extensive experience in managing complex organizations, conducting strategic planning with diverse stakeholders, performance monitoring, and tourism master planning. And Paul has extensive experience in the development of cruise line business cases during his tenure while with Tourism Vancouver. Now, when we decided to approach PATA for this task force, we took the objectives in Jerry's presentation that we were going to put in hiring a tourism cruise consultant, and we embedded that in our request so that it parallels exactly with what we were looking for and working through the many years of all this fact-finding and learning process that we all have an interest in developing. So the main objective of the task force are 5. Number 1, to determine the economic benefits of homeporting a cruise line in the region. Second, we want to determine the most feasible location for such homeporting. Third, determine the economic viability and benefits of suggested inter-island cruise itineraries, attractions, and tours. Fourth, we want the task force to identify the existing and potential demand by international source markets. And fifth, we would like the task force to determine the ideal marketing strategy, including the critical stakeholders and policy-making audiences. Now, it is understood that our task force's recommendation will be used as a foundation to market the homeporting concept as a regional opportunity for cruise line and operators seeking new and unexplored destinations. Additionally, we understand that the final report will outline a recommended business model reflecting the costs and economic details pertinent to the cruise lines, consumers, and key stakeholders. The timeline is very important to us because we have, at least I have a personal objective to meet my chairman at the GVB's goal, and that is to have such a report ready for our annual PATA summit. The PATA will have the annual summit here in Guam in May, and I think that with our group collectively and with the task force, we are able to strive for that realistic goal. There are 3 stages of this task force work. The first was already conducted on November 13th, and that comprised of a Skype call with Jerry Perez, Telo Tadagui, and myself. And we went over the scope of work and the approach and also the logistical needs of the task force. So with the consulting money that MCA had put aside, we plotted out an estimated timeline and a budget, and we are ready to now conduct the research collection of all of the documentation that the task force is requiring of us, and we will transfer that information to the task force. They will then come to Guam for their meeting to meet with various stakeholders, and I think everyone in this room will be contacted, and you will be spending time with the stakeholders to engage in discussions to help formulate the outcome of the report. The task force will be visiting Guam during the week of January 23rd through the 29th of next year. The first couple of days will be spent engaging with stakeholders. The third day will be spent with having a very serious brainstorming session with key and direct people who are involved in developing the cruise industry. And then the final report will be delivered in May. The last day, while the stakeholders are here, they will do a recap of their findings initially, and then they will formalize a report, which will belong to PATA, but since GVB is the requester of the PATA task force report, we will have a copy of that report. Phase 1, which is the Skype call that we had, as I mentioned, we talked about our desk research that we needed, the initial analysis, and the logistical preparation of our or visit for our task force. The phase 2 will be a week long, and phase 3, which will comprise of both phases, will, I think, please everybody by the time we get the report together. And so I know that through many discussions with our stakeholders here in Guam, the report will be very enriched with insightfulness from all of our constituents here on Guam, and then merged with the expertise that we have sought through the PATA organization. So that's where we are today. Jerry, if you would like to integrate more.
Yeah, if I can just close out this part of our presentation, Madam Chairperson, on the assumption that we are headed in the direction of trying to get a home-ported vessel here. Essentially, the 2 strategic goals of the task force is, number 1, to really develop a public policy case for such an endeavor. And secondly, to come up with a suggested business model that we can actually take in our hands and approach interested operators out in the market. And concluding my presentation, I'd just like to recap from the MCA point of view how to make it happen. Okay. First of all, there are different options. Option 1 is to build to order. Well, there's more than $12 billion worth of vessels on order by major big players for 2016 and 17 alone, never mind the future years. And this creates a very serious price disadvantage and construction schedule for us. The second option is to buy and to refurbish. There's very limited inventory and availability for this vessel in a very competitive market. And besides the fact that there is price volatility and little known marine history of some of these vessels. The third option is to hire out. But charters are difficult, and you need to match or exceed vessel profitability if it were deployed elsewhere. The fourth option is a joint venture partner. This can be very high risk. There's potential cash flow problems or issues, and there's probably going to be a lot of management control and interference going both ways. So we're left with the option of a concession approach. You can actually turn a cooperation and private risk capital into a major opportunity. There's very little or no public financial investment involved. A private operator assumes the risks and can access development capital more freely and can procure goods and services in a more timely manner than could a government agency. Some of the key steps we see that can happen is, first of all, developing the enabling agreements that would allow ownership by participating governments of a special purpose company or an SPC. And I acknowledged this in my board report in Koshrai last month. Also needed is to allow a 15 to 20 year lease of the commercial port, perhaps provide little seed money for setup and startup, and then SPC reaches agreement with participating governments for cruise line operating in their area. The SPC then develops the RFP for a private operator and is tendered out by the Port Authority. And this is one of the things why it's important to get this task force product done, so that we have something that we can tender out as a business model. And then, of course, we would like to see, if possible, an enhancement of this effort by some of the GITA programs. Now, the benefit of a home-ported vessel, I've kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, but I'd just like to reiterate when you compare it to what we call call port vessels. First of all, ships deployed and marketed year-round with 52 or more calls a year, plus subsidiary port calls in the region. So instead of us getting our 2 or 3 or maybe 4 a year, we can actually have 52 calls because of our home port. There's also local employment and supply chain benefits, which is much more significant than an ad hoc occasional call port vessel that also needs to be secured through bids, vessel redeployment, or other miscellaneous and expeditionary vessels. A home-ported vessel can also potentially generate 50,000 plus passengers per year. Call ships today now average only 2,000 to 3,000 per year. Supporting services for home-ported vessels can include provisioning, bunkering, chandlery, repair and maintenance, crew housing, incremental utilization of hotel room inventory and airlift capacity year-round, and not just when an occasional ship comes. The local economy can be impacted significantly from regular itineraries generated on Guam and can increase the frequency of port calls and visitors to the CNMI and regional islands in Micronesia. Subsidiary expeditionary cruises to the smaller and more remote islands in Micronesia can then generate multiple calls for them and potentially create stable routings for niche market segments. World cruise call ships such as Cunard, P&O Cruises, Region 7 Seas, Costa, Celebrity, and so forth, are really very difficult to attract because much higher profile destinations than Micronesia are preferred by their customers for the value propositions of memory and image. And the super luxury ships or yachts do not have standard itineraries and therefore not a significant opportunity as call ships. So the conclusion we've reached, Madam Chairperson, is that there is really compelling reason to believe that homeporting a cruise vessel on Guam is an important strategic initiative in developing a viable cruise industry for Guam and the islands of Micronesia. So I'm sorry the presentation took a bit longer than perhaps you might have wanted, but you asked me to give you a full report from the last meeting, and I hope that we have been able to deliver.
Thank you very much for the very detailed report, and to PATA Micronesia, thank you for your stewardship in getting the collaboration together. Before I ask my Vice Chair and our good speaker to ask some questions, I'd like to just open the floor to you first, Mr. Chair, for a couple of remarks, and then to Gita, and then to the two panel members here.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have very little to say other than thank you to everybody here for their really strong and never-ending push for this, especially yourself and Monty Mesa, Jerry, everybody here. I'm just sort of observing, but really excited to see this really start to move forward. Thanks for inviting us, and thanks especially for pushing it forward.
Gita?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, this is a long strategic process, and again, we've been studying it for the last 6 years and looking at the opportunity. There is a great opportunity, and again, with the recommendation that MCA is moving forward, again, this is a regional platform for a long-term tourism development, aside from just airline capacity, but shiploads of people potential to visit not just Guam, but the islands in Micronesia. At Gita, we are looking at planning a strategic model to try and attract investment opportunities for homeporting on Guam. We do have some, interest. We'll continue to explore that, and again, looking forward to some of the reports that will be coming out from PATA. That's a great professional panel they put together, and see what their recommendations are. But also with one thing I wanted to point out in Jerry's report, to again also enhance this regional cruise. I think you may have noted there, but I wanted to point out the fly and cruise opportunity. That's something that, with the homeporting of a small cruise ship here, could enhance, again, the attractiveness of the region, because of not just cruise ships coming for port calls, but people to fly into Guam and cruise Micronesia the same way that they would do in the Caribbean. People fly into the Caribbean and then take the cruise. And this is a model that, we've been studying how effective, but also how successful the Caribbean business model is for the cruise industry. And of course, we'll continue to study this, because this is an opportunity for, again, from a Gita standpoint, all the Guam-made products, the Guam made in Guam products could be better enhanced with, cruise people coming in and looking for authentic products for each island, not just for Guam, but the other Micronesian islands as well, which, people are always looking for exotic and unique gifts for their memory, and especially for the cruise industry. So this is something that we like to try to continue to support, and appreciate again the legislative support for MCA and to GVB in pushing this initiative for growing our next, hopefully a great platform to continue growing our tourism industry and diversifying not just by the air capacity but by ship capacities. Thank you.
I think it's important to realize, as we look for new resources and greater job opportunities and the creativity of bringing that in, this is one market we definitely have to look at. Short remarks from GVB's Deputy General.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, Vice Speaker Cruz. I'd like to thank the legislature for continuing to push this forward. I started GVB in February and attended my first cruise conference back in, I think it was March, that we had attended. And just through that short time, you and I spoke about this, and it was clear that what was needed at the very beginning was a consultant. And to move forward with this. So I'm really happy. I mean, in the short time that I've here, and I know that the Micronesia Cruise Association for 5 years have been working on this, but now we're moving. Now we're actually moving. We finally have a consultant put in place. We're working as a point of contact with the task force, Jerry, myself, and Pilar. I'm sure that we're going to also push them as quickly as from the time that I started in February to get this moving and rolling on the ground. But besides that, I would like this panel to also know that there are a couple interested parties. Monty and I had Monty Mesa, and I had a meeting with one of them. And it's a great potential. We don't have to use the port. They're going to a different area, and it's basically what they call multi-tacking from the boat to the tethering. So a lot of infrastructure, it would not be needed. So we're really happy about that. And we should know more by the end of the report in January, once this report comes out. And that's what most industries are looking for. They're looking for the specifications, the policies, the ability to provide a good business opportunity. And it's incentives that we need, most especially to encourage these cruise liners to come to Guam, business to actually invest in Guam. That's the main thing that we need to do, because of course the government of Guam can't own its own ship right now. So I'm so looking forward to this completion of the PATA task group put together, and once that's done, I think the next step is to be able to put it out there in the market so that we can get these investors to come to Guam as well. So GVB continues to support this initiative. I'll continue to stay on top of it, and I would have to excuse myself, Madam Chair. We have another conference with the governor I have to attend at the Dusatani.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tello. I'd also like to open for remarks with one of the members of MCA.
Thank you. I'm also a board member of PATA, PATA Micronesia Chapter. But one thing I can attest to from going to the PATA meetings throughout Micronesia is we got some pretty poor air service. And when Jerry and I went down the coast ride, we went there on Monday, and the first opportunity to leave is the following Saturday. And the weather started going south on us, and we were nervous we were going to be there another week, So it's a challenge. But one thing I've learned in PATA, because I'm a private sector businessman and I'm not into tourism, or at least I wasn't before, but because tourism is the driving engine to the region, I felt it was time for me to get involved, and so I am involved. And so I've learned that tourists, come out to these venues for the distinct difference in cultures and the beauty each one has in the artifacts and the sites they have, and like the ruins we went to in Koshrai that's been there for forever, Leilu, yeah. And so with the inability to travel for the traveling or the visitor industry to get from island to island because of the air, this would be a wonderful, the cruise where you can go to distinctly different cultures, one right after another, and tour Micronesia. And I could see that high on a lot of people's radar. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you very much. And I know before I ask the speaker to say some remarks, I know that she was very interested as president of APIL talking about the blue cotton as she continued to advocate for this program moving forward. And I think as we, again, attempt to look at new opportunities for new resources to Guam, both through regionally, internationally, but more importantly, for Guam and our brothers and sisters in the islands, I think it's important that this conversation doesn't stop. We've met the folks. We've brought the parties together, the stakeholders. I know there's some key government agencies missing that we have to bring to this table. The legislature is committed as oversight chair, and I know my vice chair agrees with me, is that we can't stop here. We got to keep going. And I'm going to hold MCA, GVB, and PATA. Thank you for your great assistance and your innovative thinking, to the both of you, for thinking outside the box and making sure that we tap resources that we can't afford to get and get it for labor of love. So, Vice Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I thank all of you for all of the work that you've done and to continue to move this forward. And, the chair and Jerry is right, is that this idea had really started out with APIL, which is actually consists of legislators from all of the legislature throughout what we call, and it was through APIL also that we registered the Blue Continent. The Micronesian Chief Executive Summits that were saying that they were, basically that the oceans connect us, but it's through the undiscovered Blue Continent, like you said. This is the Micronesian islands that really a lot of people don't know, and to try to discover Micronesia. So I love all those catchy marketing, words that are being used: discover Micronesia, the undiscovered islands, Blue Continent, the Sea of Islands, And historically, we all know there are only so many continents, but when you say the Blue Continent, I know we've been using them. People say, is there a continent that we don't know about that just emerged? And, and that's what it is, really. So, I'm really very happy that you've done that. I'm very happy, of course, with the report that you've put together and the consultants that the task force that you're going to put together. And I'm really happy that there's going to be a report. I'm hoping that you also report to the legislature that report. I love the idea that, this is something we want to do. It's a market that it's growing and needs to be tapped. That I'm hoping that with that business plan, it is something that, the legislature and GVB can really embrace now to make that, another, it's the same engine, but, to really tap those resources out there, because we know it's there. I like also the idea that a lot of this is actually going to happen in May. And as you know, FESPAC, of course, is going to be in May. APIL also decided to have our General Assembly here in May. So a lot of the leaders throughout Micronesia will be here at that time. And also, this is such an opportune time because we actually leave. APIL is having our board meeting in Kasrai. So we're going to be there now. So we hope we're not going to be stuck for more than 5 days. But I would definitely like to take this and make a presentation also to now the legislative body of Micronesia. And I want you to know that yes, Kiribati is also a part of the Blue Continent. I know they're far more good to hear, because we're concerned about that island as well with the climate change. So, and then maybe with this, they'll be able to take care of what they need to do with the climate change. Additionally, maybe that's something else that a resolution can be introduced in Kasrai with APIL, is the search for grants. And because our other brothers and sisters are able to go through ADB, I know not us, but we might be able to tap OIA funds, but I know that the other islands will be able to go through ADB to get some funds, because they're all members of ADB, and so they might be able to get grant monies. Oh, is the Asian Development Bank, and the OIA is, of course, the Office of Insular Affairs. But there's another group that we might also consider, and that's probably to the Micronesian chiefs, would be the Pacific Islands Forum, which is actually organized by the U.S., and they have their annual meetings also throughout Micronesia. So that's another group that we might want to consider. The others, other than Guam, again in CNMI, is PIDB, the Pacific Islands Development Forum. And they're actually, now this is the richer group, let me tell you. I mean, these guys are big Asian Pacific countries with monies. So that is something, again, PIDF. And we need to, again, maybe through our membership, we might be able to get them to make that, appeal and to try to get monies from them, because they're able to do that. We're not. So I think we can take care of ourselves through that plan. But then now with these guys, so that, like you said, Jerry, is that, you really can't do this for them. They're going to have to decide how much they want to develop, their area to prepare, because they surely need this. They know that airfare, flying in is going to be very difficult. People are not just going tourists, not that many tourists will fly there. But with a cruise liner, anywhere 3, 5, 7, 9-day cruises, that they would all definitely benefit. So I thank you for your work and for keeping us, up to date on what you guys have been doing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chairperson, let me interject here. I apologize because actually I meant to acknowledge in the beginning that this whole Blue Continent idea came out of APIL. And I'm glad that you raised that issue. I'm sorry I forgot to mention that, a senior moment. But the other thing is, actually, Palau and FSM are members of ADB. I'm not sure about the Marshalls, but I know those two communities are members of ADB, and so they should have some inroad on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Actually, the speaker covered most everything, but just, I know you finally took your cruise to Alaska last year. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I'd like to suggest to everybody, I got the idea of the area cruise by doing the cruise out of Hawaii. The fly in and fly out, if you go into the Honolulu airport, there are all those people there, because those are all cruise people. Many of them are going out. And I took the cruise from there, did all the islands, and it went down to Kiribati, went to Christmas. And it did it with a tethering. It just all little boats. I mean, you had to ride a bicycle on Christmas because there was nothing else. I don't think there was a car on that place. It was just, we just biking up and down, and those little scooters. But try that one, and you understand why I'm just like rabid about this thing, about trying to figure out a way that people can go from island to island and experience the Khosrai ruins, go down to Namadal in Pohnpei, and everything that's all throughout. It would be so exciting for everybody if we could figure out a way of marketing. And I want to congratulate GVB and MCA for getting Pata to pick this up for us. Because I think that when I listened to the names, I was like, wow, what a combination of people. And so, thank you very much.
If I could add, you made the observation, Senator, that it's on. You made the observation you were happy that we were able to find a cost-free solution, but just for what it's worth, so that everybody recognizes. Jerry and I were both on the board of PATA for a long time. I was on the board for a decade, and he was on the executive committee. PATA task forces are really interesting. Surprisingly, the members don't ask for them very often. They only do 3 or 4 a year or something like that. And when they put them together, it's not trying to save money. What happens, the people who engage in them, the experts, as you say, it's sort of a passion, right? These are people who've been in the industry 30 years. So, you can hire a $100,000, $200,000 consultant, and they're going to produce a nice set of reports that tell you basically what they think you want to hear. That's what most consultants provide. But the PATA task forces are top industry guys, passionate about what they do. It's not a cost-saving thing. We're very lucky we're fortunate they picked this up. I think partly because we have the PATA conference coming up. But I'm very excited because the report that they give us at the end will be something that's not skewed left or right. It will be a very sort of on-point analysis of what the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities are. So we're appreciative, and I'm excited about seeing the PATA task force. I think it's exactly the right kind of thing we need at this moment.
Yeah, and Madam Chairperson, let's be prepared to take some lumps, because I will tell you, having been familiar with some of these task force products, they're not going to gloss over. They'll tell you frankly what it is. I mean, you may not like what you hear, but it's very constructive. And shame on us if we don't really listen to, some of their things. So Mark is quite right, actually, on that. And I have Pilar to credit for that as well, Mark, because I was trying to figure out how in the heck do I stretch. First it was 30,000, and then we were able to squeeze, so we got 60,000. And then when she and I were talking, and she says, let's try this PATA task force, because there's several options, right? You were talking about. I said, wow, that makes absolute sense. Yeah.
I think it's a true blessing, and I want to thank again PATA's representation and Chairwoman LaGuardia. Thank you so very much, because it's efforts like this that we need to come together. And again, we've been talking about this for how long? Every time he says he's going on a cruise, I get envious. But it's really important that as we look for new opportunities, this is it. And I think that with everybody coming to this table continuously, we're going to move and facilitate this. We're going to really follow through. And I think that I can honestly say that our next reporting should be after the January, the presentation in January, and then we can do a report maybe a week or two after that. Is that a timeline fair enough to say? I got to ask for permission first.
I think it's fair to say that after the task force does its work here within the week of the last week of January, you'll get a pretty good feel for a lot of their impressions and basically what direction they'll be going with their final report. But again, I think with the partners here in this room, I think we're very committed to getting that report done very formally by May, and in time for the PATA Annual Summit and hopefully for your APIL meeting. I hope it's latter part of May. Yes.
So I guess our target date, everything's in May, but if we can have if there's any briefings before that we can share with the people of Guam, with the island of Guam, that we will be able to do it here. Okay.
Yes, there's one other thing that I know the Vice Speaker brought up in terms of these islands. If we had a home port vessel, this is the subsidiary cruises I was referring to earlier, where you have a vessel here, people fly in, but you have actually smaller vessels within that package that can route through more isolated areas, and like Koshui or other islands. So these subsidiary tours is over and above the potential 52 cruises every year by a home ported vessel.
That too was very intriguing, and I think before we get a final picture of what the policymakers need to do, we're going to need the expert answers from all of you guys that are on the table, and all the other information that we will receive from PATA and everywhere else that we're working close, the stakeholders that we're working with. So again, the commitment from this body to wait and hear from you folks, and continue to support the efforts. And I know that the legislature, it's been hard. Our resources has been hard here, but we will continue to look outside the box. And if there's any idea that can come back down for us, if there's legislation that's needed to be able to overcome the challenges that we're expecting, then we'll go ahead and commit to that. Okay, Speaker.
Thank you. I just asked Pilar about the task force meeting here in Guam, May 23rd to the 29th. In Koshui, we are going to decide on our theme for our General Assembly here in Guam next year, and I'm wondering whether this might be an appropriate time if you have some people or somebody that maybe could be part of or a keynote speaker in our General Assembly. So that
asking is free, and I always ask. So
Yes, she does. I can vouch.
I'm not sure. Yes.
Okay, so I will make that definitely recommendation then, and I'll try to work closely with you on, who and what and when. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. See what I mean, Speaker? So, thank you very much. Thank you to all the presenters here this morning. Truly a lot of knowledge that we've learned, and I just want to thank you all. I know the presentation was long. It's about 10:35, and we hope to see you folks real soon.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
So did
There
you
were lots
meet
of Chamorro
any-
kids working on the ship.
They didn't leave it.